Savannah, as a women-led business owner in the infrastructure sector operating across Africa, tell us about your business and the role you would like to see the World Bank take in supporting creation of this new generation of large companies. And how, in your opinion, can the World Bank Group partner with you and the private sector to scale that activity? So when I say you like to see the World Bank, I meant the World Bank Group. Sorry.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Our company, Bunengi, is working across the African continent as a developer of projects in infrastructure, natural resources, and in agriculture. We also own the largest construction company in the continent, and it's listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is always interesting to have women in construction, but there you go. When we talk about what we do, one of the things we realized once we were very successful in construction was Africa has a lot of projects, but someone's got to invest and take the risk in making those projects actually bankable, which was what Uchi was talking about. So we decided to develop a company that develops projects and takes the risk upfront to be able to do the studies, to actually make the projects fundable. Because in the infrastructure class, you'll appreciate that it's always been seen as unfundable or very difficult to put together any kind of structure. And so we work in these three sectors, and we build ports, we build roads, we build railways, energy projects. We are in gold and copper and iron ore, in tin and coal. We grow bananas, tomatoes, and macadamia nuts. And we're also in cement. And the thing that we are finding is there are many projects, but not all projects are bankable. And so our job becomes, how do you choose the best projects to be able to make bankable, number one. Number two, how do you work with governments that really do want to develop? One of the things that we were very surprised about is it takes so long to be able to get projects to close. And one assumes that in countries where there's such an opportunity for development, governments would welcome people like us with open arms and really ensure that those lead times are short. Well, this is not a fact. So we have come to understand that also as African governments, we're probably the only businesses, we're based in South Africa but operate throughout the continent. We're the only private businesses that don't have our governments come with us when we want to invest across our own continent. So when we come to Tanzania or to Ghana or to Angola, we find the Germans, and the German government is there with their German banks. We find the Chinese are there with their Chinese banks, supporting those companies, ensuring that those companies are successful. We're on our own, and yet we're trying to stimulate businesses that are African. Our banks, we are the third in line when we're looking for funding, and yet with these other countries, their banks are talking to the politicians. Now, I've spoken to a few presidents in the continent to try and find out what the problem is, and their biggest position is they're quite concerned that when they come with their companies, it's always seen as corruption when it's African businesses, and it's never seen as actually promoting businesses in Africa. But it's a challenge because if we are going to grow companies that operate across the continent, there has to be participation from Africans. To be able to ensure that business is sustainable, there has to be involvement of Africans and of women. So you asked the question, Chair, of what do we believe the World Bank should be doing? The first thing is training. We find that when we are dealing with our government partners, some of the challenges that make the projects, the infrastructure ones to be specific, and agriculture to take such a long time to close is, on our negotiating side, on the other side, there's very little experience of what is private equity and how does project finance work and how do you put together a PPP that's effective and what are the laws that will be able to govern that particular project so that the government wins, the country wins, but also the investor wins. Also, we would like the World Bank to be able to really encourage governments to understand that as the developer and the funder, we are taking the biggest risk. So governments need to be reasonable in the shareholding that they require to participate in these jobs, because sometimes they require such high shareholding that the jobs then no longer really are profitable, and then the investor sort of walks away and the developer thinks, well, you know what, we cannot participate in this environment, and really the country loses. We also think that it would be a great position for the World Bank to really work with governments to figure out how to harmonize commercial law. You know, how do you get the law that's happening in Uganda to be similar commercially to that's happening in Tanzania? If we're going to be able to really talk about significant, high impact intra-trading and growth in the continent, the legal environment is very critical. It must be, you know, harmonized. It must have similarities, and people need to be able to know that if we're going to invest, the investment is as safe as investment can be because there's legal protection, and that the capacity to repatriate money is similar, because that is very important to an investor to be able to repatriate money to the source or to the funder that has invested in the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Savannah.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.